Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcast. It's me, Bronwen Logan from Reiki with Bronwen, and I have with me my lovely colleague Carrie Varela, and she is from the Reiki Healing Society. Michaela's running late. She may not make it. We shall see, and we shall just move ahead. Yes. So, gosh, talking to people these days, I don't know, it's always the case. There's always a lot going on. I think we always think, though, in this moment in our lives, it is extreme, and that, for a lot of people, it's like, how do I cope? You might have overwhelm. There might be things happening in your small world for yourself that are extreme, or it might be out there in the bigger world around you, which are also extreme. So, how do we deal with these things? And how can the system of Reiki specifically help us with these things? Carrie, I hand it to you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, there's so much to say. I really feel like right now it's cancer season, and there is this decided feeling I feel in myself, and maybe with my clients and just my friends, people around me, is there just seems to be a lot of need to reflect and look at our emotional body and work with emotions. Work with our emotions on a deeper level. And I think Reiki can be really powerful to help us work with our emotions, and have had some really cool experiences of this, both for myself and with my clients, which I'm going to share with you. But, here's the thing, too, is that, no matter what tool we're working with for emotional healing, whether it be Reiki or yoga or psychotherapy or really anything that's out there, is it does require us to look at, like, directly at those emotions and honor and acknowledge them. And otherwise there is a risk of just suppressing them. And I guess what I'm saying here is, like, okay, so if I'm frustrated, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go do Reiki and deal with my frustration. And it's this just desire to push away that emotion. Then we're really not actually doing much of healing at all. We're just, actually unwilling to feel that frustration, disconnecting from it, not looking at it closely, and not tending to whatever that emotion is arriving from. And so in this case, it really, again, it doesn't really matter what tool you're working with, is that emotional healing requires us to, like, look direct right at the source of our emotions and frustrations and challenges, and see if we can find our way through that, if we can unpack that. And so, yeah, for me, that's really what I've been trying to do, is use my Reiki practice in some ways to, like, kind of sober up and, like, be like, okay, I keep feeling this and it keeps arriving for me. And so how can I sit with this emotion and tend to it and really recognize that it is true for me right now? And even those emotions don't have to be like, they kind of come and go like the weather, right? They're not who we are, but it's important to acknowledge, the storm when we're in it. Um, and the shift and the transformation that it's asking of us to take. So kind of a long introduction to that, but that's what I've been doing lately. Is just really trying to every day be in relationship with my emotional body, take mindful moments to sit with those feelings that are there for me, and meet that emotion with compassion and truth and care for myself, because I care about myself. I care about how I feel, and how I feel is important. I know that that's important. And so, and then seeing what I can do about it. And so sometimes it's not just simply to, oh yeah, acknowledge that emotion. I'm going to feel it and let it go. It's like, actually, I might need to make some choices and changes so that I'm constantly not getting stuck in resentment over this thing that's happening in my life, or this relationship and dynamic, or, um, how I feel about social media marketing. Hate it. It drives me crazy. And at some point, it's like I can't just like muscle my way through it. I actually have to find a new way of holding those frustrations and challenges in my life. So, I had an interesting experience of this though for my a recent client of mine. And I'm going to change some of the details so it just isn't. I want to, be mindful that of their story and not share the details that happened in this session. But this particular client came to me. It was a first time session, and this person was laying on the table, and I was just, facilitating a Reiki treatment, and really wasn't really sure what she was experiencing, what was going on for her. Um, but knew, that we were doing Reiki, and there's a potential for anything to arrive in a session. And for her, after the session was over, she shared with me that like a very strong emotion that she was holding in her subtle body came up, and she could feel it, the anxiety, the tension of a past experience that she recently had, and the stress was like still living in her body. And at one point in the session, she audibly sighed, and that audible sigh was like there was a moment where it just shifted, and like the energy just released, and she could feel that emotion dissipating from her body. And so that to me is really what Reiki can support us with when we're conscious and awake and working with our emotional body and meeting ourselves with that intention of compassion and healing. Um, and we can hold space for an emotion to arrive. And maybe we're intentional about, oh, okay, I want to release this specific emotion related to such and such thing, or just be more organic in the experience. And yeah, I'll pause there because I'm sure you have a lot to say about it. I have a few more thoughts to share too, Bronwen. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think it happens for people, obviously when we have treatments or working on ourselves, that we have these moments of freedom from something that has been holding us like captive. And so that is absolutely amazing and beautiful when it does happen. And we're very fortunate that with the system of Reiki, we're working with that. So we are working with the intention of releasing things that are holding us back from being that true, bright, beautiful self that we truly are. This morning I actually came across, hold on, an image of, it's a little bit dirty because it was stuck behind something, but it was an image of me as a little kid. And I'll just show you. Anyway, so,
Oh,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, gorgeous.
But, when I look at pictures like that, I see this vibrant little being that I was, and the energy that we have when we're very young, and when we, are putting ourselves out, we're vulnerable out into the world. And then all the things that happen to us after that, all these experiences that we have where, they teach us things which are not necessarily good lessons, and things that teach us to, to be quiet, sit down, be nice instead of speak our truth. All the things that we're told. I was always told to not be so excited, right? Because I was always very excited. So, to settle down, calm down. Those were words that were used with me as a kid. And it's sort of frustrating looking back on that because, I wish that I still had all that vibrancy and I know it's inside of me, but I also know all those experiences that I have had in my life are holding me, as I said, sort of captive in a way. They're like they're that beautiful, bright little being is held captive by a lot of the experiences that I've had. And it's the same for all of us. So how to find ways to release those things and to let them be, to let them go and allow my true self to shine in all its brightness and beauty. um I think sometimes, I mean, how we do that, I think sometimes I can't just say, oh, be gone, right? I can't just go, oh, these are the Reiki precepts. So do not worry. Don't be angry. Be compassionate. I can say all those words. And it is good to say those words because the more that I say them, the more that they actually start to sit inside of me as well. But just saying them isn't going to make those things happen for me. And I need to find ways to actually shift them. And luckily with the system of Reiki, we have all these different paths and ways of moving into that space and finding ways to shift things. And the other thing about that is it's, well, in my experience, I can't let everything go at once, right? So there are times when it's right. Sometimes I might not want to look at some of the things that have happened to me or how I feel about things. And that's okay too, I know I've had, you know, students in the past and where they've gone, yeah, I really want to change things and do things, and they go away and they practice and they push themselves so hard that they actually push themselves out of balance rather than allow themselves to shift into balance. And it's because they want it a lot, but is it the right time for everything to move and shift? And I do feel like we need to be in the right space for things to move and shift and things come together. And when those things come together, then we can allow things to be free and to move forward. So we need to really listen to ourselves as well and to feel what might be the right thing for us in this moment. In what is, sometimes it might not be to practice really hard. Sometimes it might be to just be quiet or maybe have a cup of tea or, just listening to what we need rather than making ourselves do things, I guess is what I'm saying. And the system of Reiki can be there for that as well. I mean, I think it offers a lot of contemplation and quietness as much as full-on practice.
Yeah, I love all that. It's so important not to force and push really with anything, you
Yeah.
know. But it's a hard lesson to learn because we're alive, and sometimes we do need to happen. You can't just expect it all to come to you. So there's a nice ebb and flow there. But yeah, I often liken it to I learned this somewhere along the way, but just like our emotions are like a sleeping dragon. Seems appropriate in the year of the dragon here. But you know, when they're asleep, we leave them sleeping. It's like that emotion isn't really, impacting me today. I'm not feeling anxious. There's no need to awaken the anxiety. We need to sit with it. Like we just celebrate that it's sleeping right now, like a baby sleeping. Don't wake the baby. But when it is palpably there and it has awakened and it's time to look at it. I think Reiki can provide some really wonderful tools, and especially in traditional forms of Reiki, we broaden it beyond hands-on healing and really, extend Reiki into, I think, particularly meditation. Meditation can be really powerful as a way of processing, releasing emotions, finding centering and grounding in any given day. But even within, different emotion meditative techniques, there is like kind of a caveat, is that we can use meditation to just kind of really bypass ourselves, bypass our feelings, be enter a more disconnected state rather than a connected state. Use it as a way of running away from our feelings rather than running towards them. So it's in our intention that really matters when we're looking at this stuff, and when we can, um yeah, use the precepts too, as kind of the container to hold those emotional inquiries, and give ourselves enough space and time to really allow a shift and a transformation to happen. So I have another story of this. So I wasn't able to join you guys last week. Sounds like a really good episode, though. Bummed that I missed Reiki as magic. Um, but
It
I'm
was
glad we
silly.
had that. But I had been, at a festival weekend and teaching there, and the overarching theme of the festival was peace, and I was like, oh gosh, so such a good intention, right? And that really sits at the heart of the ultimate aim of Reiki too, is to bring ourselves back to peace, and to find peace in our day-to-day living, find peace within ourselves and within our life and our circumstances, and also find peace in our purpose, and being connected to our purpose as a pathway to find peace. I think that that's really beautiful, and that was some of the intention that Yusui Sensei had when he had this, or sought after this unique form of enlightenment called Onsen Ditsume, which is characterized by a state of inner peace. And from that state of inner peace, you find your purpose, or you feel more connected to your purpose for living. And anyway, so I just was reminded that that's such at the heart of the practice of Reiki too. And to sit inside of this peaceful container was an intention that I had, kind of in the weeks leading up to this particular event, and then of course at the event. And what I discovered in my own practice of peace, in this time, was that, because it's always different, right? I mean, every season's a little different, every month's a little different, but for me in this time was that as I intentionally drew myself back to peace, it was actually this polarity that brought up a lot of emotional stuff that needed healing. And peace was such a powerful container, but inside of that peacefulness, it was like it's kind of like oil and water. The stuff that I was not at peace with, it started to come up. It come up and come up. And when we have emotions that want to be surfaced, want to be seen and acknowledged, it's kind of like holding a beach ball underwater, you know. And you're like, okay, and then, when you're not looking or get distracted, it's like poof, comes up. And that was kind of my experience of it. It was not actually the most peaceful month, but actually what I think I was doing was I was really processing and healing, and looking at some things that were a source of conflict for me in my life and internally, and gave me some clarity about that, and of course some emotional release too. And so, it's funny because emotional healing is, it's not linear, and it's a little messy. It might involve some tears and crying, and sitting with anger and really sitting in how uncomfortable it feels, and sometimes the outcome is a little different than what you think. Like, you can't control the outcome, but it is actually about surrendering to a bigger, a better outcome, and learning how to process emotions rather than just kind of shove them down under the water. So we can, you know, hopefully after that, this, a season of emotional healing, um, we can just feel more relaxed and centered, more joyous in our life. And maybe it's not something to do every day. Like I said, you have to don't wake the sleeping dragon, but when it's there, like having some tools to work with it, I think that's just it's amazing. So helpful.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, that we sometimes feel comfortable with a lot of those sleeping dragons. And because even sometimes when they're not really sleeping, they might be stirring. And because it's a familiar place for us. And depending where we come from in our lives, like I came from a dysfunctional family. And so what is normal and familiar to me is probably quite different to you, Carrie, like what's normal and familiar to you. So what's normal and familiar to me might not always be really helpful to me as well. And sometimes we can't really see that. And we think, oh no, we wonder why we get drawn to situations that aren't great for us, for example. But it's often because it's something that is familiar to us. It's something that we know from our lives. And, we mightn't put these things together, but it means that we are often living in these sort of, it's like, when you go walking in the sea and there's all rocks and things that are going to hurt your feet, and you're sort of like, you're walking and you're going over these things, but you sort of can't get away from it. And that's life. And what we want to do with the system of Reiki is we want to have insight into this and insight into our lives, to allow these things up. And as I said, through contemplation, for example, it's a really good thing. And to think about how we sit with the fears in our lives. And these fears are often the things that we're treading on. But sometimes we feel, like I said, almost like comfortable with that. It's all we know. And it can be quite unfamiliar to feel balanced. And so we're with something like the system of Reiki, the more that we do the practices and we move into this space of balance, then we're retraining ourselves as to what is familiar for us. So what is a good space for us actually to exist in? And it means we can release a lot of those things that we're holding on to, which keep us back. I was thinking about some of the very simple practices that we can do that can help us with that, rather than it being a complex thing. So even the idea of seiza, so sitting in seiza, one of the ways that we can understand seiza is to sit still. So sitting still might feel really unfamiliar to us. So it might feel uncomfortable, but it's actually it's because when we sit still, it gives the opportunity for things to arise, obviously, yeah, as well. So, but to actually being able to really allow ourselves to sit in that quiet space is something that we might need to teach ourselves, to sit in gusso, meaning to unite. So just simply sitting with our hands like this and just breathing down into our heart, into our bellies, and just sitting like this, allowing everything to come together through this idea of unification, and just sitting in that. These can be really uncomfortable spaces, but it doesn't mean they're bad for us. Yeah. And the more that we do it, the easier it becomes. And we're retraining ourselves to sit in a different space in our lives and to release things that we no longer need.
I'm so happy that you brought that up, Bronwen, because I think it's so incredibly wise, and it is true. If we have, longstanding history of a specific emotional turmoil, childhood trauma, in any of its different forms, or chronic anxiety or depression, that can also be another good one to look at. Is that we become very accustomed, let's say for example with anxiety, it can be very accustomed to living with it,
That's right. Mm.
and you can be very accustomed to feeling it, and that it feels quite uncomfortable or weird or off when we don't have it.
Mm.
And that's it's challenging, right? Because it's like, why am I so addicted to this emotional pattern? And who would I be without this anxiety? Who would I be without this
Yeah.
inner conflict?
Yeah.
It's a really profound question to ask ourselves, right? um and learning not to react to it, not learning not to kind of constantly wake up that dragon anytime we're in a meditative space too, to just be in the moment. And
Yeah.
one of the things that really has come to me is, and I'm not sure how to flesh this out, but it's like after all of the conflict and turmoil and suffering that we've been through, what if peace was the reward, the answer for all of that? And peace doesn't come with a bigger paycheck or more life security, or any of the things that in particular anxiety can be about. Like, I'll stop feeling anxious once I have more money in my bank account, or I'll stop feeling anxious once I know how this outcome is going to turn out. But we don't know that, and as soon as the outcome comes, there's a whole other things a host of other things to be worried about. So how do we learn to train our mind and heart that it's okay to be at peace? Like, it's okay to just sit 20 minutes and not get a big realization or answer or any sort of clarity, but just say, I'm going to do this so I can feel more peaceful today, and really allow not just my body to come to peace, but also my mind and heart. And, um, it takes discipline. It takes a little emotional maturity too, to recognize that a lot of times, what our emotional body might need is the specific outcome that maybe it will happen, maybe it won't, but you know, we can't always control that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, and that I've been sitting with it and just, especially just connecting to that energy of peace. It's just this wonderful feeling of like letting my mind relax into peacefulness. And as my mind relaxes into peacefulness, my heart follows suit. My heart can also soften. And that's where often, in our heart, perhaps more, we're connected to, this emotional healing, these emotional waves that we're feeling in our life. And yeah, so I mean, there's no one right way with emotional healing, but I just love that Reiki has so many different aspects of ways in which we can work with it. And I guess one more thing I could mention too is that the key of Reiki, this whole notion of life force energy or vitality, the Chinese, the Japanese as well, and probably many other Eastern cultures thought of ki as holding our emotion and mental body as well. So our vitality, our physical health is tied in with our emotional and mental health too.
Yeah, it doesn't exist on its own. We're not like these separate little compartments, are we? Which is why it's great to go and to have a hands-on healing treatment. Touch as well, how amazing is that? And how it can trigger things for us, release things for us. Really beautiful, totally beautiful. And just shifting our breath, moving our breath and how we breathe and how that changes how we feel. Which you were just talking about, moving into that peaceful space. for me, when you talk about peace like that, these are just words in a sense, aren't they? And it's to experientially be those words is something else. And, perhaps peace is enlightenment, and perhaps the Reiki precepts are enlightenment. So it's, us working with ourselves and peeling that onion and having the tears of the onion as we peel it. But the feeling this releasing, and often it's, we coming back. It's, this idea that we release something and it's gone is a very mental concept in reality. It's not necessarily uh what is happening. I mean, we're trying to very much mentally control and understand things when sometimes we need to let go of that. But because when we do release things, we might be still come back around to that emotion at another time, maybe from a different angle, or, it's not like, I think things become too prescriptive as well when we're thinking in these ways. And it's a bit like, I'm just thinking Disney princesses here. Sorry, Disney, but like teaching a child that, that once you get married and you're happy ever after, everything's very prescriptive. And then when these kids grow up and then they're like, oh, actually, life is nothing like what I was told as a child, right? And because it's not, we're sort of like prescribing how things should be, and in fact, there is no prescription to that, and it is pure experience, which is a blending of the mental, but it's not completely only the head. And I think we do get too carried away with saying, oh, right, I just released this and now it's gone, because then it's a bit depressing when it comes back again 10 years later, but maybe from a different angle or a different experience, and it's because maybe we know it, it's easier to feel that, go into that feeling again, or whatever it is. I don't know, but I don't need to know everything, I guess, is also what I'm saying. And that it is as much an experience of life and being in the flow or not.
Yeah, I love that. So true. Yeah, I mean, it's just a little tricky. But it's what I hear too from what you were saying, and that what inspires me to mention something is just that sometimes peace is an active thing. It's
Mm.
not a passive. It's not just about sitting peacefully. It's not just about ignoring those feelings or just saying, okay, I'm gonna just mentally work on releasing this and forgiving that person, or, working with that, you know, archetype that I was given as a child that's just so not true, and whatever it is. It sometimes peace requires action. Is it requires us to look carefully at those places where we're in conflict, and to um you know separate out what's necessary conflict from unnecessary conflict, what's just the drama that doesn't
Yeah.
isn't isn't really important, but really there's a genuine place where there's conflict, and what is that, where's that coming from, and why. And so why I think sometimes emotions can be so hard to deal with is like sometimes we need to say something, like we need to say something to the people who are bugging us, and we have to say it in such a way that they can hear it,
Yeah.
you know and we can have to say it in such a way that we can actually meet together in a place of mutual respect and understanding, where we genuinely want to resolve that conflict, not just create more of it, more separation and division. um so in that sense, it's hard to know where conflict is going to land for us, but knowing that peace is that ultimate destination. We can't bypass the conflict to get to the peace. We have to actually move through it, and that's when real emotional healing can happen. And
Mm. Yeah.
think too, you know, being connected with, peace as that ultimate aim creates more safety for those hard conversations to happen. Um, and
Yeah, I love that. I was just read this amazing piece by the Dalai Lama recently, and he was just saying that that we need to, part of being compassionate is helping people to see when they're being, I'm going to use the word, I'm going to swear, but dickheads, you know what I mean? That sort of thing, right? Like if someone's being terrible, he's like, well, you could let that person just be like that, and they're just going to go and be like that to everybody else as well, right? It is actually your responsibility to let that person know that that is not appropriate in whatever way that you can. Yeah. So, you need to action. This is the action, right? You need to stand and you need to say, no, I don't think that that's a really, that whatever it is that, try to help that person to see that what they're doing is actually not great. And it's not creating a lovely world to live in, a compassionate world to live in. And in doing so, we're actually helping so many other people in doing that. But of course, he said, if you're going to put yourself in a dangerous situation, you're not going to do that. But if you can somehow possibly reflect back for the person, the situation or whatever that they're in, that they're creating, then that's a really a wonderful thing to do for the world. And that's a good thing to think about, how we can help people. We often talk about, mm, I don't know, it all sounds very lovely, but sometimes it's not so lovely, sometimes it's messy, and we need to step into that messiness and try to find our way around in that as well.
It's so good. And it also can be like a warm bath. That's my favorite way to process
What?
my emotions. A warm bath.
I
All right,
love
so
it.
one of my favorite process emotions, you know, the day, a long warm bath, candles, maybe sacred smoke, and sinking in, really relaxing my body, and then from that really sweet place, working with emotions and letting them release too. So
Yeah. And, just thinking about that, with just what I was just saying about what the Dalai Lama said, that's like taking two people, for example, but we could find those two people within us as well. We can take it inside of ourselves and we can see those things happening and where we're not being great. And we need to sometimes stand up to ourselves as well and have a chat to ourselves and work it out within us. So we can see that in all different levels. And I'm sure a lovely, beautiful, warm bath would be very supportive of that situation.
where you say, man, you're being a dickhead.
Am I? Oh, I didn't realize. Okay. Well, I think we've come to the end of our chat today, Carrie. I love that. Beautiful. So good to talk about emotions, such weird and wonderful things that we get stuck on, we live with. Oh, and hopefully we do manage to work with them at different times and find our way through and create new familiar spaces that are supportive of us and supportive of those around us. So if you've enjoyed our conversation today, just as much as we have, then do like our thing and click a notification bell thing and you'll get information when we've got a new one coming up. We also have a Facebook page, which is Reiki Women Podcast, and a Facebook group as well, Embodying Reiki. And so please come and join us, be with us, and we will continue to make more videos. If there's some subject that you'd like us to chat on, just send us an email, put it in the text somewhere at the bottom of here, and we will certainly do our best to do that too. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So with Michaela, of course, as well. So until then, lots of love.
Bye.